You may be considering used or part-worn tyres for your next tyre purchase, but I'm going to show you reasons why we would urge you to think twice about doing that. We bought 50 part-worn tyres, which we then had examined by an independent tyre consultant, and I think the results of that just might shock you. This tyre is the only tyre in our investigation that was being sold legally. It carries the correct markings to identify it as a part-worn, it has adequate tread depth, and it had been tested for any potential safety issues. However, the rest told a different story. Although we were sold these as part-worn tyres, they weren't marked as part-worn tyres, which is required by law. So in the strictest sense, they were sold illegally. Far more concerning were all these tyres, which had much more serious damage and, in some instances, potentially lethal forms of damage. This particular tyre was described by the tyre examiner as having the potential to kill. And whilst it looks good on the outside with adequate amount of tread depth, you can very clearly see a piece of metal sticking through the tread. When we look inside, that piece of metal pokes through the tyre tread about 5 centimetres. And if this tyre had been properly inspected, that would have been impossible to miss. If we roll this tyre along the floor, we can simulate what would have happened if we'd fitted this to our car. This piece of metal on the inside is slowly rubbing away at the surface. Before long, that will penetrate the carcass of the tyre. Potentially, that means a rapid deflation. And if that happened on the motorway, who knows what would happen to the vehicle, its driver, and of course, other road users. And as for the rest, we had signs of repairs that were clearly not up to standard, exposed cords, damage to the bead, evidence of running underinflated, and various other forms of potentially dangerous damage. In total, more than 1/3 of the tyres we examined had serious forms of damage or non-compliance. And that's the problem with part-worn tyres. You just don't know their history. Whilst on the outside they may look fine, on the inside, where it really matters, there could be a host of problems that can compromise your safety. You have to ask yourself a question. If someone removed these from a car already, there must be a real good reason for them doing so. And there always is a good reason, as one driver from the northeast found out recently to his cost. Keith Johnson was driving with some friends in his Renault Megane Scenic on a cold, damp morning in Cumbria, travelling around a relatively innocuous bend when his car started to skid, rolling into a ditch before eventually landing up in the middle of a field after flipping over several times. Amazingly, Keith's passengers escaped uninjured. However, Keith wasn't so fortunate, and he's now been left paralysed from the chest down and can only move his arms and his neck. Keith had only replaced his tyres 2 months before, but had opted for part-worn tyres, as he thought he'd be saving himself some money. The police investigation blamed the tyres as having made a major contribution to the cause of the accident. Keith's tyres had a tread depth which was significantly below the legal minimum depth of 1.6 millimetres. If new tyres had been fitted, Keith could still have been walking and driving today. So, when it comes to replacing your tyres, think about the hidden dangers of part-worn tyres and Keith's story. For more information, visit tyresafe.org.